Hi guys, this is Hero. How's everyone doing today? Aaj bata kem cho, aaj sab kaise ho. So today I'm going over what the Lagna Rashi or your ascendant sign represents. Okay, and this is possibly the most important but misunderstood topic in the whole Jyotish, right? And the reason is because people don't understand how the flow of the signs intersects with the flow of the houses. Okay, because the flow of the houses and the flow of the signs never change. And just before I start the video, if you want to learn more about that, I have two videos: all astrology signs made simple and all astrology houses made simple, if you want to learn more about the flow of those, right? But if you don't understand how, one, the two individual flows themselves, and then how they kind of intersect with each other, you're never going to understand, really the flow of the whole chart, right? And you're going to kind of revert to kind of memorizing certain things. Like, for example, memorizing, if I have, Cancer in my ascendant, what does that mean? Okay. And that's really not ideal for various reasons that I'll discuss, right? But that's what most people do, right? And then they tend to, look up and get sort of like westernized answers and things like that. And it's not really that great of a strategy, okay? What you have to understand is right at your ascendant, that is literally the start of your material life. Okay, and as you go around the houses, things progress in a certain fashion. Okay, so for example, let's just say I have Cancer in the ascendant, right? That in the flow of the signs is also, it doesn't change, right? So after Cancer is always going to be Leo and etc., right? And for example, across from Cancer is always going to be Capricorn, right? Capricorn's always going to be in the 7th house. Okay, so the reason why your ascendant sign is so important, one, is because yes, this is the sign that rules your actual first house, but also another reason that people don't realize is that it sets the tone for all the rest of the houses in a very certain fashion. For example, if I have Cancer in the first house, right? That means, let's just say I'm naturally a little bit more of a nurturing person, right? Because that's kind of what Cancer represents. I now have Leo in the 2nd house, right? 2nd house, let's just say it's associated with family, which it is. But let's just say, I know 2nd house represents more than family, but let's just isolate family here right now, right? I have Leo in the 2nd house, which represents family, okay? Leo, you could say, is the sign that governs what gives you personal fulfillment, right? So if I'm Cancer, right? Like my ascendant sign is Cancer, and I'm naturally a more, nurturing person and things like that. That means I'm going to find fulfillment in my family. You see how these two kind of connect, right? But this is not really that discussed. I haven't seen it too much. You might find it here or there, but a little bit, right? Likewise, if I have Capricorn across from Cancer in the 7th house, right? So I'm naturally, a more nurturing person. My 7th house represents what? My relationships with people, right? So that means, and Capricorn represents what? You could say in a sense it represents like your sense of discipline and things like that, okay? Or let's just say that, the discipline, right? I don't want to go too much into detail on tangents. You could say, because I'm a nurturing person, I am more disciplined with my relationships, which is true, right? That's why a mother, for example, has a lot of discipline with her kids and things like that. I'll go even more, right? If I have Cancer in the ascendant, I have, and this is going to be really great if you're a Cancer ascendant, but if I have Cancer in the ascendant, I have Libra in my 4th house, right? 4th house represents what? Let's just say your home. And 7th house, Libra, the 7th sign, represents what? It represents your connection with people, right? So your connection with people is very strong in your home, right? Which is what Libra represents in the 4th house, right? So you can see, and you can see how that makes sense for a Cancer ascendant, someone who's very nurturing, right? So you can see how all of this kind of comes together. It's not just about, Cancer in my 1st house means, bullet point 1, 2, and 3. It's not about that. It's about the whole entire flow, okay? So you can see how, yes, it is about what actual sign is in the ascendant, but it's also about how the flow is for the whole rest of the houses, which is extremely important, right? Whatever sign is in your ascendant sets the tone for everything else, okay? But here's the other thing. it's going to be very, very different if I have, 5 degrees Cancer, my ascendant is at 5 degrees Cancer versus my ascendant is at 25 degrees Cancer, right? And that's where you kind of also have to understand the flow a little bit deeper in nakshatras, and kind of, the fact that the beginning of Cancer will be a little bit different than the end of Cancer and things like that. And that you're going to just have to, you can see why it's a little bit important, right? Because if your first house, let's just say, starts at 5 degrees Cancer, your second house, where Leo is going to start at 5 degrees Leo. And I mean, to an extent, there's other astronomical factors and things like that, and you got to look at the Bala chart. But let's just pretend, for example, each house starts roughly at the degrees that your ascendant starts at, right? So your 7th house will start at 5 degrees. Your 4th house will start at 5 degrees Libra, and your 7th house will start at 5 degrees Capricorn, right? Versus if your ascendant starts at 25 degrees Cancer, now the rest of them are going to start at 25 degrees. That's going to change it up entirely, right? Because each house is going to have more of a flavor of the next sign in it than if it were to start at 5 degrees, right? I hope that really makes sense. This is really, really important, okay? It's not, just about, the other thing, right? Yes, your first house is, it governs your physical appearance a lot. And, especially your face and things like that. But I would not get too caught up in, general physical appearance from the ascendant. Yes, it's a cool thing to look at correlations and things like that. But you have to understand astrology is it's like a relative spiritual science, right? So it's going to apply to you relatively in some spiritual fashion. You trying to use this to, and yes, you can draw some correlations and things like that. But I'm just making this up. Let's just say I say, Sagittarius ascendant people have higher cheekbones, right? I'm just completely making this up. It's not like I'm going to take, 100 people, and the 10 people that have, that are Sagittarius are all going to have high cheekbones, right? Or whatever, right? And I know there's going to be people that, that's not what it's used for or whatever. But my point is, I wouldn't look at this just to kind of Aquarius ascendants are taller or something like that, right? Again, I'm just making this up. I have no idea if that's actually true or not. But I would avoid going, steering as far away as possible from certain superficial, very material correlations, especially when it's used in regards to seek some sort of romantic partner, right? Because you tend to glorify certain things, and this is all your ego talking. Okay, I'm not saying there's zero truth to it, but what I'm saying is when your ego gets involved, it can completely cloud your judgment, and there's probably a lot less actual rational physical proof in it than you think, right? Because like I said, this is kind of playing out in a different perspective, and we can only draw from our own human selves certain material correlations. We cannot really draw certain hard conclusions, okay? So you got to be really careful when doing this, okay? And if you want to isolate different, for example, the degrees thing, right? If you have your ascendant starting at 5 degrees of a certain sign versus 25 degrees of a certain sign, this is why nakshatras and padas and things like this become more of a factor, right? And now another thing, what if I had to sum up, right? What exactly does your ascendant Rashi represent, right? Does it represent your personality or your soul or whatever, right? The answer is all that kind of stuff depends on what your definition of those terms are, okay? But in general, it does not represent your personality or your soul or how people view you or anything like that, right? All of these are represented by the combination of your whole chart, okay? This whole concept mostly is a Western thing. Yes, there are some things, like for example, your sun represents mostly your sense of identity, right? Your moon does represent, to an extent, your emotional part of your mind, right? Just like your ascendant Lagna there's no actual like abstract term it represents. If you want a literal definition, it literally represents your Lagna Rashi, the Rashi that governs the flow of your material existence. But like that's not like a fancy catchy buzzword, right? But that if you want that's probably what I'd come up with. There's probably maybe some better definition, but I'd avoid using those those fancy spiritual terms to kind of chalk it up to a certain concept, okay? Because this is kind of much more and much less of those terms at the exact same time somehow, okay? But that's it for this video. I'm going to end it. I'm a little past 10 minutes. If you have any questions or comments, as usual, please feel free to let me know. And until next time, I will talk to everyone later. Thank you all very, very much for watching.